Welcome everyone to the Coalition for Marriage YouTube channel. If you're joining us again, it's just such a privilege to have you. If you're joining us for the first time, we are the UK's largest pro-marriage organisation. Some of those who are joining us again will be able to repeat this instead of me. We represent tens of thousands of individuals and groups up and down the country and around the world, in fact, some from all faiths and none who support this notion of one man, one woman marriage. And we know other things take place in society. Clearly they do. But we just think that the marriage between a man and a woman is a unique situation. It brings to culture and to society something which nothing else replicates, and the social science evidence says it leads to the best outcomes for children, the best version of the next generation. And we believe that mums and dads should be able to live the lives they want with their families and to bring them up in the way they want. And one aspect of that is if mums want to, they should be able to stay at home instead of going out to work and bring up their kids. And there shouldn't be tax and benefits penalties. In fact, there should be incentives to allow them to do that if they want to. And somebody here who supports that notion with everything in her being is Anne Fennell. Anne is chair of a wonderful organisation called Mothers at Home Matter. Anne, would you like to say hello to us and tell us a little bit about your wonderful organisation?
Hi, I'm Anne Fennell. I joined probably about 13 years ago now, in 2010. The organisation itself, Mothers at Home Matter, was set up about 30 years ago in the face of pressure for mothers to return to work. And I suppose our aims are still very much the same. The pressure is still there very much for mothers to return to work. In fact, I mean, most of the so-called family-friendly policies are really about getting mothers into work rather than looking at the children. So we're really here to represent mainly mothers, although, fathers are very welcome to join our organisation. But what we found is that there aren't many organisations representing mothers in this specific area, mothers who would like to be at home. So we've retained the name Mothers at Home Matter, and really the focus is to support those mothers who either are at home raising children or who would like to be at home more. It doesn't have to be full time, but the emphasis is on being able to care for your own children and have more time with them. Look at that from an economic perspective and also socially, because I think we've kind of devalued the role of mother at home or primary caregiver at home, father at home, but particularly mother at home. It's looked as a backward thing. It's looked as old fashioned. It's actually looked as not really being very useful as doing much work. So we're trying to change the language, raise the status and change the economic level playing field so that there is a genuine choice.
What fantastic aims, if I might say. And looking at the kind of all of your website, and we'll make sure that your website details are up on the page here, etc. But you seem to put an emphasis on the idea that children first, and that's a laudable aim. And we've interviewed people like Katie Faust, then before us, and lots of other conversations like that. People who really are passionate, just like you, about putting the needs of kids above maybe the wants and the desires of adults. But what about people that would come along to you and say, well, actually, it doesn't really matter whether a child is at home with its mum or whether, in fact, a child is in nursery with somebody good looking after the nursery. So what are you making a fuss about?
We're a voice, just giving a different narrative, really. I think it does matter. I think some children are absolutely fine in nursery, but some children really don't cope very well at all. And there really does need to be the option that parents can have an alternative form of care. And at the moment, we're kind of closing all the other options off. I think one of the problems is the particularly now with the latest government measures, even nurseries won't be able to cope. The funding just isn't enough to provide high quality care. And really, if you are sending very young children to nursery, it's a high quality that you really need to look for. But actually, the most optimal, the best development for children that research has shown is home care. But so many people just don't have the choice to be able to be home with their children. And I think we've kind of lost what the role of mother in those first few years actually is about. And the mother does, or primary caregiver does play a really important role. in the emotional side, in the nurturing, in the sort of soft side. So it's not really academic. We're not talking about academic achievements. We're talking about resilience. We're talking about buffering the baby, and we're talking about babies here, from stress, regulating their emotions until they're able to do that themselves.
There seems to be a push, generally speaking, in Western cultures, to get mums away from their babies almost as soon as possible. So we've recently had the idea of childcare from 9 months being provided, if you like, in the recent budget. There are pushes in parts of the US to give foreign aid to countries based on them accepting that that they implement broader childcare regimes to separate mums from their children. I don't know. It seems to not recognise the benefit to society of kids being brought up by their mums. What do you think do you think it's just economics behind this, or is there something else?
Well, I do think it's mainly economics. And I think the latest budget measure is because there are labour shortages, but I don't think that getting mums to work is particularly the right answer. So I don't think it's the only answer either to labour shortages. I don't even think that the Treasury are going to gain particularly by these results. I think it's going to cost them a lot more. And particularly, as I said, if you're going to do it properly, if you're going to give high quality childcare, it's going to cost a lot more than the 4 billion that's been proposed.
Yep.
I think it would be cheaper to enable parents to be at home longer and actually have better results for the children. I think what it does do is it does show a growth in GDP, which I think is what the big push is for. So if mothers go out to work and if you have more nursery workers, you see a rise in GDP growth. But the GDP doesn't measure, what's valuable in life and doesn't measure the happiness of families or the well-being of mothers or the well-being of children.
Yeah. What you're definitely not saying is that women shouldn't have careers, or that women shouldn't, have equal opportunity to men and anyone else to enter You're not saying that at all. You're saying, I think, what people like Louise Perry and others are saying is that, look, you can get value from a career, but nobody dies having got great meaning from their career. Maybe some people do, a tiny minority do, but most people die having got great meaning from their children. And that's, in terms of lifelong meaning, that it's significant. And being able to spend time with your kids, if that's what you want to do, is something the government should recognise and support.
Yeah, and I think also, we have a long working life. Most of us will be working past 60, probably into our 70s. Take 4-5 years out is really a short period of time, and actually what you gain in those years, and we don't really talk about it. I think Germaine Greer sort of looked back saying, the raising children is probably one of the best kept secrets in the Western world. It's hard. It's really hard. It can be lonely, but actually it can be quite fulfilling. And speaking personally, it's been one of the best times of my life. I've loved it, and I don't want that opportunity to be denied to those who want it.
Yeah. And this is coming from somebody with 6 boys. So, I think that gives you a specific qualification that a lot of people don't have, to be honest with you. And that, is something very, very useful in the workplace. We don't approach it from a religious perspective, the discussion around marriage. We very much from an evidence base. And the evidence base is actually quite clear that the best start for kids comes from growing up with your married mum and dad. So it's not evidence from the Bible. It's evidence from sociological research across time, across cultures. And that's not to say that that's the only way things can happen, but that's the way things happen best in terms of outcomes for the child. So if the government is promoting anything, maybe that's the thing they should be promoting. That's where we come at it from. And it sounds like, while you welcome everyone, you're coming at it from a pretty similar position, which I think is great.
Yeah. And actually, fathers and mothers have wonderful roles to play, and actually quite different in some ways. But fathers play a fantastic role in the mothers sort of look after the child, but the fathers sort of bring them out into the world, send them out that way, and say,
There's something about having a happy family that love spending time with each other, that have grown up together and just enjoy family life with loving parents, you can just see how it gives you a start in life that nothing can replace. Their level of kind of personal confidence maybe, but I don't know, they're settled in a way that a lot of people aren't, and I'm just sure that's because mum spent a lot of time with them, etc., etc. We love each other. We're committed to each other. Nothing's going to change that. And you think, I don't know, that gives them something. Now, you talk on your website about this idea of taxes and benefits, and that we kind of deal with things differently in our country. So we give benefits on a family basis, yet we tax people on an individual basis. And one of your things is saying, look, that's not right. We need to look at those things in a different way. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. In 2014, the UN brought in a resolution that the family should be the unit of economic consideration. They should at least have the option of being taxed as a unit. Because I think a lot of the problems arise because they're seen as individuals. But the benefit system was set up, the tax credit system was set up to help families because the tax system didn't do it. But the problem with the benefit system is that as soon as you go onto it, it's very hard to come off it. And now the government are introducing more and more sanctions so that you really, once you start accepting benefits, you're under the sort of diktat of the state. So now they're introducing sanctions that if you don't start looking for work when your child is 1, that you will be, sanctioned and maybe lose your benefits. So I really think the family needs to be, they need to be taxed as a unit and freer to use the money as they choose.
So from an economic perspective, I mean, you come up with different initiatives, you have local support groups, you encourage people to get involved in the campaigning side of things. What would you, people listening now, what would you recommend people do to make their voices heard, if you like, in the context of the things you've just been talking about? One
of the first things is to write to your MP and say, we would like the option to be able to care for our own children. And one big thing that we're trying to push for is to make child benefit fair, because a lot of families now are, because the threshold's been frozen for so long, are hitting this point of 50,000 where they start losing their married tax allowance if they have it. They start hitting the higher rate tax. They start losing their child benefit, and they really are not very rich families. It depends where you're living. If you're living in London, where you're paying sort of £2,000 a month rent, 50,000 is not a huge income. And the other problem with that is, when you start losing your child benefit, you hit the high rate tax. It's very difficult to earn more money to bring home more disposable income. So for every pound you earn as a breadwinner, whether that's mother or father, you lose about 70p of that, depending how many children you have. You can lose up to 90, or even it may even not be worth getting a pay rise because you lose more money than you earn. So with the taxation, it really needs to be fair for families so they can actually earn more and bring home money rather than meet these cliff edges and meet these really high marginal tax rates. And these occur right the way up the income stream, and particularly when you're on universal credit, you face really high marginal rates of tax, so they're almost not worth earning more. So we need to change that so that families can earn more and bring more home. And
I wonder if you're familiar with things like the initiatives in Hungary, where, for example, if you're a mum and you've had 4 kids, you never pay a penny of tax again, which sounds pretty good, doesn't it, really?
Yes. I've actually just been voted in as president for the European Federation of Carers and Parents at Home. So just last month. So we have 15 different organisations from different countries around Europe. So one of the things I'm really looking forward to doing is working with all these other countries and finding out what works and what doesn't. I know in Finland you have an allowance to stay at home, but I think they're fighting to keep that.
Yeah, well, congratulations, Anne. That's fantastic as well. So we get to interview you from 2 organisations now, which is so much better than one. What do you feel about this notion? Because there's the ongoing push to get kind of women back into work, and the idea that the state looks after children. That's nothing new. People like Engels 100 years or more ago were saying, this is a great idea. Let's get women, separate them from their kids. The state can bring up the kids. Don't worry about that. The idea that even this notion that it takes a village to bring up a child. Well, does it, or is it really the job of the parents of the child?
Well, big question. I would say it's a mixture of both, really. I think, for many mothers, particularly, and for fathers, there is a wrench when you separate the baby from them. When you put a baby into nursery, you have this huge emotional wrench, and particularly if a baby's not settling and is crying, and there is such a thing as separation anxiety, which occurs about 9 months to 3 years. I think that's really hard, particularly for mothers, and I think you do see, and certainly in other countries like Sweden, you're seeing a lot of sickness amongst mothers, and I think it's to do with this stress. I think it can be quite lonely being a mother at home, so I think you do need more than just your individual families. You need the wider community. I think Sure Start used to be very helpful. I think lots of mothers found Sure Start places really helpful, and the wider community there. But I do think that I think the family, within the family, you're the best judge of your own child. You know whether a child is settling into nursery or not. You know whether you can cope with that separation, and I think really the family needs to be the freedom to be able to choose.
And while everyone will say, look, adoption is a wonderful thing, and for poor kids that find themselves in a situation where they haven't got access to their mum and dad for whatever reason, to be adopted is a wonderful lifeline for them. But outside of that, as I think you're intimating, biology really matters. Having that kind of biological link to your child makes that big difference. And when you replace that with somebody who's maybe paid to care, as opposed to somebody who has that biological link, there is a significant difference.
Well, I think it's the continuity and consistency. So it may not be a biological mother; it could be, like you said, not an adopted mother. But I think it's the continuity and consistency of care that is really important. So the primary caregiver may not be the mother, although I think in most cases it is. But with a daycare, you get a transition of staff, and also you're invested, aren't you, in your child, whether you're a biological mother or not, in more ways than a daycare person is. And you get some wonderful nurseries, but it's still also taking the child outside a home environment into a much busier environment. And as a baby, that's very different from a 3-year-old. So I think that's another thing we need to look at, are the different ages of children, because the development needs of a 0 to 3-year-old are very different from the development needs of a, say, 2 to 3-year-old or a 3 to 5-year-old. And so if we're designing policy, then we need to be really clear whether that actually is a good thing for children or not.
Yeah, and I think the idea that we're facing a demographic time bomb is quite important, and the notion that, well, if mums were more supported to stay at home and to be able to make that choice financially, maybe they would do it, and maybe in fact that would address some of the problems facing us in a demographic time bomb.
Yeah, I think, in the studies in the parent survey for the Department of Education, a lot of mothers were saying that if there were no economic barriers, they would rather spend more time with their very young children at home. So maybe whether it's a longer maternity or paternal allowance, rather than, help to go back out to work, that would be preferred. And I think in countries where that is the option, where they have the option either to go to daycare or be at home longer, I think actually the be at home longer is taken up.
And one of the things you do is hold local groups. So one of the issues, and I know this from experience with my wife when she's been at home with our children, loneliness can be a thing. You want some contact with other adults, and one of the wonderful things you guys do is provide local support groups, which is great. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the supportive aspect of what you do, helping mothers at home link up with other mothers and give mutual support?
Yeah, well, we started this about was it 2 or 3 years ago in lockdown, where we realised, well, it was actually easier because we started it through Zoom, and we've got about 13 different groups around the country, but it's very organic. So if people come to us and say, can we set up a group, we just help them start, and it's really up to the group leader. And so some groups meet in person every week. Some groups meet in the evenings as mums and they go out for dinner. Some groups take young children to play areas, and some groups just meet like you and I now are doing on Zoom or WhatsApp groups. It's just a way of supporting mothers in the local area, because it can be very lonely. I don't think it's particularly natural to be at home on your own, isolated. I mean, I think in the past there used to be, it was much more communal, and there were many more people at home, so it was easier in that sense. More friends and sharing, and more family, I think, around. But it is hard now if you choose that option to be home.
And in terms of if people want to join your organisation, they can just go to the website and click join.
Yes, please do, because we are actually quite a small organisation trying to do quite a lot, and our only means of funding really is donations and membership, to do things like attend conferences that all cost money, and social media. So yeah, we really value any support.
Yeah, and I know you hold online events as well. I've seen you've had lots of chats with Miriam Cates, for example, and she's doing some wonderful work all over the sphere of family support. So tell us a little bit about how you came into contact with Miriam.
I saw an article in the newspaper where she was supporting family taxation and looking at sort of how families could be jointly taxed. And I wrote to her, and she was really supportive. And I've worked with her quite a lot since. She's brilliant MP. She's sitting on the education committee at the moment for early years and childcare, asking some fantastic questions. We've been working to just try and enable the option to be at home. Amongst all the other options.
And that's it. It's for mums who want to stay at home with their children while they're young. They should have the option to do that. And we shouldn't financially penalise them through the tax system and other things if they can't do that. And also stigma from the rest of society as well, because that's another thing. It's almost like, well, what are you doing staying at home? Yeah. Why aren't you out being productive? And how do we change that kind of perception, which even from the most unlikely sources, if I'm honest with you, Anne, comes up sometimes?
It was a really good question. I think the first thing is to change the narrative. So one of the things I'd like to focus on is changing the narrative that mothers at home or carers, whether it's actually elderly or young, are inactive economic units, because actually anyone who's been caring knows that it's very active and it's hard work. So to change the notion that it is not work is a first thing. So I would try and we would like to use the term active caregiving rather than inactive economic units. There are other terms that, we talk about the burden of childcare, not the joy of childcare, the joy of having children. Stay-at-home mums were sort of considered idle. And so, yeah, I suppose like, you've heard the phrase, be the change that you want to see in the world. I suppose we just have to start speaking about the positives, that it can be difficult, but it can also be really wonderful. There's magic, it's joyous. And I think for many moms, I think there's great sadness in missing out those first few, really great developmental years where the first words, the walking, and the love. I mean, I just being with your baby is there's so much joy, as well as pain and hardship, but it's just so much joy. And I think we just need to speak about that more. And I think things are changing. I think when people see that it's a progressive move, and it's an active choice. It's a choice that we're doing because we think it's a good thing. I think maybe more people will feel more confident to choose that option. I think one thing what I'm seeing when I go to Parliament is actually we're losing the confidence to believe in ourselves as parents. I think I hear more and more that the professional knows best, and it's best to send your child to nursery because the professional knows best. But I think when they're really young, when they're babies, they don't need professionals. They need love.
Nothing more important. You're absolutely right. And just a final question. How do you guys differ from the Tradwives movement, for example?
Well, I suppose we are more of a lobby group. We're looking to try and change the economics. We include all sorts of mothers. Many would call themselves feminists. They call themselves maternal feminists. Some are single mothers rather than being in a marriage as such. So not particularly a traditional movement, although many of us will probably be in a traditional form of relationship.
Yeah, I mean, some overlaps, some differences. But to be honest with you, the more groups that are saying, well, hey, actually, it's okay for women to stay at home and bring up the kids if they want to, the better. because the evidence suggests it's pretty good for kids, to have that constant care. The evidence suggests that, and I know there's differences all over the place, but that biology does make a significant difference, and that mums have that link with their kids that is really hard to replace biologically. So that's, I'm grateful for what you're doing.
I think most roles you can replace. You can be quite easily replaceable, but with your own child, it's not so easy to replace you.
Yep. Yeah. And you've mentioned also on your website and in other places this horrendous attempts to eradicate the word mother. Yeah. So, replace it with birthing parents and then maybe just get rid of it altogether, shall we? How do you feel about that?
Awful. But when you hear like progenitor 1 and progenitor 2, it doesn't evoke the same emotion as mother. I think there's something very special and something about measure and nurture and love and...
Yeah, I've discovered doing this job that you just don't get in the way of passionate mothers, because they can and will change the world. Yeah, so I'm so grateful for what you're doing. I'm really pleased to have spoken to you today. Is there anything else you want to tell us? Anything else you want to advise our supporters to do? Obviously, come and have a look at your website. But anything else we can do to further push this agenda forward, that mothers should be able to stay at home with their kids if that's what they want to do?
We just need more people speaking up and saying that this is a really valid choice. It's a choice that we want our children to be able to have, because I kind of worry that my children are not going to have this choice that I had. I think, I just think we need to speak much more positively about it. Do join our group. But I think the more people who are saying this is a good choice, and we need to speak about the needs of children and babies particularly, I think that the better, and the more we can change things, because at the moment there's just not enough people in sort of media and in Parliament willing to speak up, and I think those people who do speak up are often shot down. So I do feel sorry for anyone, especially men, who say that there's a natural nurturing role or anything. They get shot down pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, Anne, I don't think anyone's shutting you down anytime soon, and I'm really glad about that. So all the best to you, all the best to your work, and we'll watch it going forward from strength to strength. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thank you.